life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's truly a pleasure to have you with us this week. Bern, welcome back.
Yes,
We've missed you. You've been gone the past couple of weeks, and it's wonderful to have you back. We had some great guests on the show while you were gone.
Yes, you did.
Stephen Mills and Austin Ditter, and shared some great insights with us. We talked a little bit last week about fear. And I noticed as I was driving around this week, signs on T-shirts and in the back of trucks and hats that said, "No fear." And we kind of laughed to ourselves in the studio today because we realized that that's not especially always a wise thing to say, that you have no fear. Fear can be an ally.
Exactly.
When I was little, tiny, I remember my father saying to me, "I'm really worried about you." And I'm like, "Well, why, Daddy?" And he said, "Because you have no fear. You just will do anything, and you don't worry about the consequences, and you could really get hurt." And I've noticed that in my life. Sometimes, if I had more fear, I maybe would have been more prudent in my choices.
I think, that's a valid way to look at it. I hung on every word these last two shows. It was a delight to see you performing with Austin, wasn't it? Yeah, Austin Ditter. And Stephen, of course, always contributes a great deal. But in the second show, you were talking about fear, and it caused some things to bubble up in me. And I thought, God, I wish I was there. Oh, well, I will be next week. So we'll be able to do it that way. The words, and in fact, you had already addressed the fact that you felt them and were a little discomfited by the idea of controlling fear, in the fact that we've discussed time and time again that we're really not in control of anything, certainly fear, or to overcome fear. And I don't know that it can be overcome, or that we really want to, because like you were saying, fear is an ally. It keeps us from doing imprudent things. I think sometimes a mosquito doesn't have a proper amount of it because they land on the back of a man's hand. It's over, where with a certain amount of fear, where you're going to do things more judiciously. Interestingly, too, and you did mention the T-shirt about no fear. I've seen that a lot of times, and my tongue goes into my cheek, and I think, oh, sure, it's a cute thing, but without fear, we got a lot of problems. And fear is our friend, there's no question about it. It's just that maybe there's been a misunderstanding about it. It does come up this way, too. I was watching the show with someone who I have a high regard for, a very capable, competent guy, and he was a little put off by the idea of fear. He says, a lot of times like we talked in terms of that you're either in a love mode or a fear mode. And he said, I'm not in a fear mode. He said, I just get angry. I get frustrated. That's all there is to it. He didn't correlate that with fear at all. And I think we really have to examine that pretty carefully, that what is that about? It doesn't have anything to do with rationality. See, rational fear is where you have a good reason to be fearful, okay? For example, standing on the ledge of a tall building, to not be a little fearful would be just silliness, pure silliness. That's very appropriate. But what happens, I think, underneath that socio-economic veneer that we talk about? See, there was a world out here, and I don't have my heavy pencil. I made a mistake tonight. I hope this is visible. Maybe they can tell me if it is or not. Probably not. Remember we talked about a time lifeline? We can say that that's a socio-economic veneer. And it seems like everything is going along okay, but my evidence is, as I spend a lot of time around people, that as they're moving along from one thing to another, that time lifeline is undergirded with little explosions of frustration, or perhaps a certain sullenness that will come in. You know how we get moody and, sort of depressed and oppressed? And then sometimes we freeze up, and I'd call those icicles. And then there's another little frustration or burst of anger or whatever. And then pretty soon it goes along fine, and we have another one, perhaps where we really get upset. And so actually, when you look at this, our time lifeline, instead of being level, really begins to take on this shape. See that here? Mm-hmm. We go way down in here, and then over here, and then up here. And that's uncomfortable. Uncomfortable to be around, uncomfortable to be. And so the thing that we keep talking about is how to understand ourselves well enough where these things dissipate, even disappear, so that there is a more level perception of all of the things that happen. The only way to do that is through understanding and the use of words and what's going on. These frustrations, these little bits of anger, have to be from fear. Now, the reason I say frustration, anger, agitation, upset, those are little bursts of anger that come from fear, and that represents the fight that occurs. See, whenever we go into a fear mode, we've heard a lot about the fight-flee response. Well, it's not a fight-flee response. It's a fight-flee reaction, okay? And reactions tend socially to be inappropriate because when we react, now fear is one of them, fear is, one of them is fight. We lash out inappropriately. Or sullenness is where we freeze up, okay? Or we begin to escape, to disappear, or we get moody, this type of thing. And when that occurs, I do have something to darken this up a little bit here. Let me go with this one more time. This is our socioeconomic veneer, sparked by moments of frustration, depression, or freezing up, okay? And here's another explosion here, and we ended up...
I'd like to make a distinction for some of our audience who may not have tuned into previous shows. You say that it's a reaction and not a response, mm-hmm. and just by way of explanation, you do make a pretty clear distinction between those two terms. Yeah, reacting meaning that it's not appropriate, or it's just...
A reaction can be appropriate, but usually in a socioeconomic situation, it manifests itself as inappropriate behavior. Okay, in other words, if you're reacting, it turns out as inappropriate behavior. Response semantically means to be able to move towards something and open up to it and embrace it. If you're not responding, however, you're going to be reacting. You're doing one or the other every moment of your life. And to react is to pull back and close up, okay? And then when we react, which is a natural state, we're in a constant state of reaction. It's just that if we have the tools to use, we can quiet that before it manifests itself as behavior, as it happens inside of us, sometimes so quickly after practice that we're not even conscious of it. But certainly someone outside looking in wouldn't be aware. Like I have moments in my life where I'm sure I'm just as agitated or upset as anybody could be, but no one knows that. You know what I mean? Because I'm managing it differently. Managing and embracing. In other words, rather than overcoming fear or controlling it, I think it's a matter of embracing it, recognizing it, going to it, saying, I understand, this is what I can do about it. And if I have tools, I can do something about it, which is responding rather than reacting, which means losing it.
What kind of tools are you talking about, Bert?
Pardon?
What kind of tools are you talking about?
Oh, we've talked in the past about the life formula, knowing, for example, that there's a harmony of dichotomies in our life. I don't want to graph it all out on this particular show. I suppose I could. But the fact that it's pretty good evidence, and this goes back thousands of years too, that there are two primary emotions. Now we talk about other emotions, what have you, but truly there's only those two, love and fear. But even love we have to be careful about. Love probably would be better defined as nurturance. Our innate understanding that to nurture is a form of survival and propagation and expansion, okay, to nurture. And so we have intellectualized this nurturance, and we call that love, okay, the compassion, understanding, sympathy, empathy, these kinds of things. But if we're not doing that on purpose or out of practice, because these are not natural states, okay? All of these love manifestations will be out of practice or on purpose. But if we're not doing that, then we may be behaving inappropriately, painfully. We do it by fighting, fleeing, and freezing, kinetically, verbally, or physically. Do you remember those things that we've talked about? See, in other words, when we react, we can do it verbally. And we all know what that can be like. Nasty, hasty words, inappropriate sounds that come out of us that are just really painful. Or we can run or flee verbally. That means avoiding the issue, talking all around it, never getting to the point. I see evidences of that every single day. People not addressing their truth. It's kind of, adapting, accommodating, enduring in our relationships and in our business and what have you, letting things kind of be the way they are.
And then oftentimes complaining about it.
Oh, later, sure. Or at least going through a lot of stuff inside about it. Oh, yeah, it's difficult. Or we can freeze up verbally just by being moody, just not being able to say anything, either not being able to think of anything to say or just not choosing to say it. And moody hurts. I mean, it hurts the person who's moody, and it hurts everyone in their environment. Mm-hmm. And so, and we call that inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior. And to acknowledge that when you're being inappropriate, it doesn't feel good, certainly, that indeed that is a reaction to fear. Now, fear of what? Probably loss of control. Things not going the way you want them to go, okay? That would be a loss of control, which is a function, a responsibility, if you would, of the subconscious mind to control. It thinks it's in control. It doesn't know any better. It can't see, hear, feel, smell, or taste. It just wants everything to kind of stay just the way it is. It's felineo and reptilian in nature. It's ignorant and indolent. And yet, it's an accumulation of everything that's happened up to this point in time. So far, so good. Don't rock my boat. And anything that does, it could be a gesture, a word, anything, can go, whoa, what's this? And it begins to behave inappropriately. And if we can understand that and know that we're always in command of this, we always have a choice about it, as long as we have the tools to work with. Now, the tool, of course, is what's speaking to me. Of course, it's life formula. I can't even imagine living without it. But, because when I didn't have it, I lived a very volatile existence. I had a lot of inappropriate behavior. Not proud of it, certainly. It was just the way it was. I see it around me every day. And once in a while I come real close myself. But now when I do, I know what's happening. And so I can plug in, the vehicle that I use and say, oh, wait a minute, I've got a choice about this. And really that you plug in the vehicle with a single little phrase. Well, two little phrases. Be here now. Okay, be right where you are. Don't worry about the past or future. The second thing is, remember the second thing? Am I really going to, what? Die. Now, Stephen mentions that a lot. Whenever you're talking with Stephen, I bet you don't go an hour or so when you're talking with Stephen where he doesn't bring up the fact that we're not going to die. Because we need to be reminded of that consciously all the time, because the subconscious interprets anything different as potential death. That's what I mean by survival. It's irrational. It has nothing to do with reality. But it doesn't know that because it can't, remember once again, can't see, hear, feel, smell, or taste. And so all of this, you're kind of dealing with a blind, deaf, senseless entity that thinks everything is just as it should be right now, no matter where you are, by the way. That's what's really painful about this, that if we don't understand this, we're subject to it. I mean, it actually takes over and can influence our behavior in such a way that it's just terrible. We could go on and on about this. It's just that these explosions and this sullenness and what have you can be eliminated with understanding. And if not eliminated, reduced to such... In other words, here's the thing. If we can take that and reduce it to this, you know what I mean, rather than this big one, then maybe people out here won't notice. If we can get it down to here, perhaps we won't. I'm convinced that I've had moments in my life where maybe 20 or 30 years ago, I would have been looking for an axe handle. You know what I mean? That today doesn't even give me a pause. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's what's so what? So what am I going to do about it? So what effect does that have on who I'm becoming or what I'm about or what we're doing? It doesn't. You know what I mean? And to know, too, that all of that authority is over only ourselves. We can't have any effect on that other person other than to behave appropriately, to calm them, to slow them down, to sympathize, to empathize, to understand. to forgive, maybe that can make a difference. No guarantee, though. No guarantee. All we can do is to do that and
well, you know what?
thrive.
It does make a difference because it makes a difference in you.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you're able to get through some very difficult situations with peace and calmness in your heart because you know that and you have an assurance that you're behaving appropriately, and you can walk away from this situation saying, regardless of the outcome, I'm pleased with myself and how I handled it, and it's not my problem anymore, and not be ashamed or concerned about that your behavior was inappropriate.
I think, too, the thing that gets in the way, and maybe this is review to some, and that's good, but maybe it's new to somebody else, and that the fact that our lives are influenced incredibly by our need to possess, to control, and by expectations. We expect things of people and expect things of ourselves that we may not be prepared to deliver. And out of that, see, those are forms of emotional states that, if we don't understand them, can really whip us around and make our life tumultuous. Terrible.
Well, I want to make a comment because you said a lot of times the question to ask is, am I really going to die if this happens, or am I in? But a lot of times, the answer would be, of course I'm not really going to die, but I'm going to lose money here, I'm going to lose, I'm going to be embarrassed, or I'm going to miss an opportunity, or somehow this is going to be costly, or a penalty in my life, and it's not what I wanted, and it's going to set me back a great deal, and the amount of work and energy and effort and angst that I'm going to have to put into this situation to resolve it or to get it back to where I feel like it ought to be, can be extremely challenging.
Yeah. See, those are the expectations that we develop for ourselves or that we submit to. I noticed over the years I would sit down with people and write goal lists, and I noticed that wherever I did it in the country, north, south, east, west, even in Canada, South America, sit down with people, make a goal list. And after a while, I'm a slow learner perhaps, but after a while you begin to realize everybody's got the same list.
Yeah.
And you say, well, is that their list? Is that really their list, or is that society's list? That's what you're expected to do, expected to accomplish, expect to be able to do. And it's so unfair. It's incredible, because it may not be that way at all. And sometimes by letting go of some of the expectations, and trying to fulfill someone else's idea or an idea that you bought into. See, might think it's our idea, but it may be an idea that we bought into. That's the way it's supposed to be, that we've lost, all semblance of influence over our life because we're trying to catch up all the time.
And I agree. I think a lot of the things are where we're pursuing, material possessions or honors or position in society. Definitely those are because of external pressures. But others may be our own. Things we want very much to accomplish that we very much have set in our minds as important to us. Maybe there are things that are important to someone who's significant in our lives, a partner, a parent, or a child, and maybe that particular activity or accomplishment isn't important to us, but to have favor in their eyes or to keep the relationship smooth is. And so that would be a fear, not a fear of death, but certainly a fear of loss.
Oh yeah, right. One thing too that I think softens a lot of that, I know it does, is to, once again, to go back to a clearly defined purpose. Because without a clearly defined purpose, we can get caught up in projects and plans and expectations that are out of harmony, that are going in different directions sometimes. But with a purpose, everything begins to line up a little bit. And frankly, a lot of the tangible things that we think in terms of become less important, therefore perhaps more achievable. You mean if it's, for example, I know sometimes that if a person really needs a car, to focus on the car, is almost a negative. In other words, it becomes like that's a negative factor rather than focusing on something else that might acquire the car. In other words, and that other thing would be the fulfillment of a purpose. And that has to be clearly defined. So all this stuff wends itself together and, kind of and blends, hopefully in time, so that everything gets easier and easier and easier. But it's hard to discuss it in one session because it all comes rushing in from all angles.
Right.
And so time, patience, getting to know some of the formulas, being able to say, what is my purpose? What is that really all about? And I'm anxious to read yours. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks from today, I'd like to have you come and read your purpose on the air. Yeah, have you written it yet? Is it clearly defined?
I have.
Not a goal now,
no,
but a purpose.
I have quite a few ideas. Probably need a little more refining.
Okay, yeah, I'd refine them. Get them. See if you can get them on paper. Yeah. It's a challenge. I worked for years on writing a statement of purpose because what happens? Everything gets in the way.
Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah,
and the more people you have in your life who are dependent on you, or you're dependent upon, or you have responsibilities to or with, the more difficult it is, because you can't just say, well, you know, I've decided that my purpose is, you know, to feed all the hungry people in Africa. See you later, or whatever.
That would, wouldn't probably be a good purpose.
So you are, you know, you're limited a lot of times by your previous commitments.
And being careful too that some of those things that are expected of you are not socialized issues, things that you're supposed to do and have in order to be a fulfilled person, because maybe that's not the thing at all that's going to work for you.
But nevertheless, if you have 10 mouths to feed, how much money you need to make is going to be somewhat different than if it's just yourself that you're trying to support.
Right. Yeah, it can get challenging.
Yeah.
You do very well, but it's difficult. Right?
It's always a
you
challenge.
do very well, but it's difficult.
It's always a challenge. Yeah, and you have to, the thing that helps you when you realize that this is more difficult than I thought it would be, is that I'm learning. Each day I'm learning. And there's a great value in that. And you just have to look at where you are now and where you are a year ago. What have you learned? How much wisdom have you acquired? And I always have liked this quote that says, when we get good at something, it's not the nature of the thing has changed, but our ability to do it has increased. And so we have to measure ourselves that way.
It reminds me, I had someone the other day ask me if you've heard us speak of Kurt Uiops, little admonitions and aphorisms that really don't work. I had a lady ask me the other day if this was one of them, and she said, if it's going to be, you've heard this before, if it's going to be, what? It's
up to me.
Up to me,
right.
Yeah. And I say, yeah, it's a Kurt Uiops. Yeah, because it's not going to happen that way. If it's up to me, I mean, if it's going to be, it's up to me, and synergy and serendipity. In other words, I think a lot of times...
There's a lot of other factors involved.
Yeah, who you are at this moment in time may not accomplish nearly what you need. Okay, in other words, if it's up to me, if it's going to be, it's up to me, it's not enough. In all probability, if there's going to be some movement, you're going to have to harmonize with somebody. You're going to have to coordinate and collaborate and bring people in, and there's where the synergy occurs.
But I guess you could say something like, if it's going to be, it's up to me to start the ball rolling.
Oh, yeah.
Or to take an action that will move it in that direction.
And know that that's the case, though, that it's to initiate, but it's unlikely that you're going to complete all by yourself.
Right.
It's not that kind of a world out here. Too many people trying to be the captains of their own ship don't even have a crew. That's tough, because if something goes awry, then everything goes haywire. You know what I mean? That's you're all by yourself. That's tricky. Anything more about fear? What you said? You saw the signs. No fear. We discussed that.
Right. Well, you were going to talk a little bit more, Bern, about why fear is our friend, and give us a definition or maybe some examples of when fear is an ally.
Well, I think that it's always an ally, because the subconscious mind, when it emanates some fear, it perceives something is happening, and it has a right to do that. And it shows itself in a sweaty palm, or shaky hand, or a queasy stomach. You know what I mean? And that's its warning. Say, look out! What's going on here? Okay, it has a right to do that. And I would want it to continue. Like when I talk to my subconscious, I don't say, now you just be quiet. I don't want to hear from you anymore. You always want to appreciate it. Thank you. I understand where you're coming from. I got the message. But I'm going to be conscious about this, and I'm going to think our way through this. And I'll get back with you in a minute with my reassurances. This is going to be, you've really got to be able to separate in your mind talk, that internal talk, between your conscious mind and your subconscious. Because if you don't have the conscious mind communicating with that subconscious mind and quieting it, reassuring it, assuaging it, it's going to dominate your life. But you have to respect it. Say, thank you for your input, but you can't see, hear, feel, smell, or taste. I can see. Other people are doing this. We're going to be okay.
So you're kind of implying that people who talk to themselves are more sane than people who don't talk to themselves.
Absolutely. It's really funny, sometimes I have people look at me funny when I say, if you just quiet yourself a little bit and start functioning and listening, you'll hear 3 voices. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about the voices that a schizophrenic might hear, but you can hear the messages coming from within your mind about, is this honest? Is this appropriate? Is this kind? Is this thoughtful? I mean, that's our conscience, and we have to honor that. I mean, there's no question you have to honor the conscience. And then the subconscious is chattering away about, we can't do this, I don't want to do this.
We're going to get hurt.
We're going to get dog bit, shot at, something's going to go on, sure. And from its perspective, it's absolutely right. And so it reveals itself to us, and if we're not aware of it, then we succumb. It's called accommodation. It's called adapting, succumbing, making do, coping.
Well, Bern,
that's tough.
What would you call, and I hope this isn't too off the subject, what would you call the part of our mind that says, I want, this will feel good, this will feel great, I don't care about what anybody else wants or needs, this would feel really good right now, whether it's food or to hit somebody or to do something gratifying that's not appropriate. Is that also the subconscious mind?
I would think so, yeah. If it's a real dominant thing that comes over you, this is what I want, I would say probably that's a subconscious thing.
Impulsive behavior, oftentimes when there's not fear involved, is something we all struggle with. Maybe we could make that into a show sometime.
Well, that'd be a fascinating subject, that's for sure. I do say this, that I'm glad to be back. I miss being here. And I wanted to let people know that this is Life Talk, and it starts a half hour earlier if you just drop by while surfing. Because if we say same time next week, you're going to get the very last part of the show. So come in a half hour earlier, watch Life Talk, which is about life, living, and making a living. And if you hear us say something that you want to have developed, call in or write in to 916, first of all, 366-8749. And if you call in, we'll communicate, and we won't even bill you. We'll just move on. We will send you a couple of tickets if you're one of the first, let's say 6 people to call. We'll send you a couple of tickets to a live performance we've got coming up here soon. And there's nothing like a live performance. And so it's about that time, so I'm going to sign off and say that my name is Bern
Moses.
And you're Gina Fitt. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.
Bye.